everyone, and welcome to Sipz and Stories. My name is Elizabeth, and in today's video I will be discussing a recent trip that I took to Key West, Florida to visit a literary landmark, which is probably one of the most famous literary landmarks here in America, and that is the Hemingway House in Key West. This is the place that Ernest Hemingway wrote the majority of his novels, including one I'll be discussing today, For Whom the Bell Tolls. While I was there, I picked up a number of books, of course, which I can't wait to share with you today, along with visiting one of my favorite modern children's book authors, Judy Blume, who just happens to have a bookstore in Key West as well. So grab your favorite beverage as we discuss Key West and Ernest Hemingway. Alrighty, so while staying in Miami Beach, of course, I had a great time. But then I hopped on the bus and headed down to Key West. Key West is about 2 hours south of Miami, really easy to get to. There's a lot of tours that go down there. You can rent a car and easily get down there, and just the scenery and wildlife is so beautiful. You pass through the Florida Everglades, of course, while you're there. You see the mangroves, which are really exciting, and just that endless horizon where the sky meets the ocean. So beautiful. Key West is probably most famous for being a beach town, a party town, all you Jimmy Buffett fans. But for people like me that love books, it's also a really great literary place to go, because this is where Ernest Hemingway spent a lot of his time, about 15-20 years of his life, with his second wife, Paulina, when his kids were growing up. So his kids basically grew up in Key West. He wrote a number of his most famous short stories there, along with some of his most famous novels, including For Whom the Bell Tolls, which I'll be talking about today. And I've always wanted to visit the Hemingway House, so getting down there, seeing it in person was such a special treat for me. It is very centrally located. It is just south of the downtown area off Duval Street. Really easy walk from Duval Street, or you can just hop on many of the buses and tour buses that go throughout Key West throughout the day. Super simple to get to. It's also really great for kids and older folks as well. It just makes a great kind of day trip thing to do while you're in Key West. You can take a guided tour, of course, of the Hemingway House, or you can just do what I did and do a self-guided tour where they just kind of let you basically wander throughout the Hemingway House on your own. I stayed there for about an hour. I had a great time, just kind of walking throughout the rooms, reading all of his books, looking at all the photographs of his travels and his numerous wives, of course. It was a really great time. I mean, seeing his typewriter where he wrote the majority of his novels, very exciting for me. And of course, seeing his library, which I always enjoy as well. The Hemingway House is most famous for being a Spanish colonial house. Some of you probably will recognize it from photographs. It has that 360 wraparound wrought iron porch, which when you're there in person is really epic, really neat to kind of walk around and get the 360 views of downtown Key West, as well as the Gulf and of course the famous Key West Lighthouse, which you can see from that porch. Really interesting. While you're there, you'll also notice that there's a lot of cats at the Hemingway House. Hemingway was a huge lover of animals, especially cats. And so the Hemingway Foundation raises and breeds these cats, and they just kind of are run loose throughout the house. So be prepared, because the tourists will stop on the staircase, in his bedroom, in his writing studio. They'll stop and they'll just basically be taking photographs of the cats, which there's nothing wrong with that. I was there more for the books, but the cats are pretty cool as well. The downstairs, really simple, self-explanatory. I'll show you some close-up shots. Basically the kitchen, dining room, a little study down there. And then the exciting part, the bookshelves and the book collection, was just off the landing on the staircase. So of course I spent a lot of time up there looking at his book collection, and I'm happy to say that he owned a lot of the same classics that are right behind me. So happy to say that I have some of the same taste as Hemingway, of course. And while you're there, there's a number of bedrooms, separate studies and rooms that house a lot of his memorabilia, his cameras, his typewriter, a lot of photographs from his travels and all the people that he met in World War I, World War II, Africa, Europe, Idaho, Key West, Cuba, all those places. Really, really fun place to kind of just walk around and meander. I really enjoyed that they just kind of let you walk around on your own. The grounds of the Hemingway house are really beautiful as well. A lot of gardens, a lot of foliage, kind of that tropical environment down there in the Florida Keys. Really, really beautiful to kind of just wander around the gardens. There's a lot of animals out there as well. I came across a turtle and a lot of like different birds out there. Really cool. And then right alongside of the main house is the pool house and the pool, which Paulina famously built for Hemingway. And Hemingway's writing studio is right above the pool house. So unfortunately you can't go into the writing studio and pick up any of the objects. You just kind of walk up the stairs and then peek through the window and kind of look at it. But really cool because that's where he wrote, of course, some of the famous ones like Snows of Kilimanjaro and For Whom the Bell Tolls. And I think he wrote a little bit of Farewell to Arms at the Hemingway house in Key West as well. So really, really exciting for me to see his writing studio in person. Below his writing studio is the bookstore of the Hemingway house. And of course, you know that I spent a lot of time in the bookstore. And while I was there, I wanted to get something that was special and unique to the Hemingway house. You can get Farewell to Arms, Old Man and the Sea, anywhere at any bookstore or online on Amazon. So I wanted something that was really unique to Key West. And fortunately, the docents and the booksellers that were there were really friendly. We chatted for a long time and they recommended this book, Papa Hemingway in Key West by James McLendon. And a lot of his friends and family called him Papa. I forget why. So this is just the history of him in Key West and his time in Cuba, of course, and Havana. Really, really cool. I'm happy to own this. When you buy any of his books at the Hemingway house, it comes with the Hemingway House sticker that it's embossed. Very geeky, but very cool if you are a book lover like me. While I was there, I also picked up this one, which is recently back in print. And this is 3 Stories and 10 Poems by Ernest Hemingway. This is the first story collection that he published in Paris during the 1920s when he was living there with his first wife, Hattie, and friends with all the expats like F. Scott Fitzgerald and Gertrude Stein. This also happens to have one of his most risque short stories, which is up in Michigan. Very interesting. It's about a woman that is being date raped, and Gertrude Stein even thought that it was a little too risque to be published at that time. So this is now back in print, and I'm really excited to own this copy of the 3 short stories and 10 poems, which is the first thing that Ernest Hemingway ever had published. If you're looking to learn more about Ernest Hemingway or start reading some of his works, I highly recommend the documentary that was on PBS last year by Ken Burns. It was an excellent documentary. It profiled Hemingway's life from his early years in World War I, his time in Paris, again with Hattie and Gertrude Stein. And then it talks about, I think the second part talks about all his time in Key West with Paulina, his second wife, and then his time in Cuba. And then the last one talks about like his 3rd and 4th wives, where he did the big game hunting in Africa and then ended his days, unfortunately, very close to where I live in Ketchum, Idaho, where he took his own life when he was, I think, 61 or 62. A really great documentary. I highly recommend it. Throughout the documentary, a lot of famous writers talk about some of his short stories and his novels, of course. This collection was published in complement to the documentary. It's the Hemingway Short Stories, and it is edited by Tobias Wolff, famous author Tobias Wolff. It features a lot of the short stories that they talk about in the documentary, and I really think it's just a nice place to start if you are new to Hemingway. It has a lot of his famous short stories, including the one I talked about up in Michigan, that famous one that Gertrude Stein thought was too controversial. It also has probably his most famous story, which is The Snows of Kilimanjaro. having read Snows of Kilimanjaro for the first time, I would say that it is his best story. It's just really excellent. It's about a man that's dying in Africa and he's just kind of reviewing his life. Really excellent short story. It also has The Hills Like White Elephants. That's a really great one about a couple that's contemplating abortion. And then my favorite short story from this collection happens to be The Short Happy Life of Francis Macomber. I love that story. It is absolutely horrific yet hilarious. It's a really fun one for fans of Agatha Christie. It kind of has a little bit of a flavor of an Agatha Christie mystery as well. Love The Short and Happy Life of Francis Macomber. That is a fantastic short story. So I do recommend this, both the documentary by Ken Burns and the companion collection of short stories if you're looking to break in to Ernest Hemingway. I've read the majority of Hemingway's short stories and novels. The only novel I had never read, and so I read it when I went to Key West, was For Whom the Bell Tolls. And this is the one that he wrote mostly in Key West, probably his most famous book. It's about the Spanish Civil War, of course. It features a young American soldier, Robert Jordan, who is commissioned to blow up this bridge. He falls in love with a Spanish woman named Maria. It's a little wah-wah, I won't lie. For Whom the Bell Tolls is probably not my favorite Hemingway. However, it is very interesting because it is Hemingway's critique on war. This one is about, the communists versus the fascists and how the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. This one is really excellent for our current times. I mean, again, Russia is stirring up some crisis, and this one was critiqued a lot by different critics and scholars because it's Hemingway's critique of war as just being fruitless and really stupid. War, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. So really good one to read right now about the disillusionment of war. Again, I won't lie, For Whom the Bell Tolls is not my favorite Hemingway. I absolutely love Old Man and the Sea. A lot of my students did not like that book, but it's just really great. I also happen to love Farewell to Arms, another one that's not everyone's favorite because of the tragic ending. I really just love Hemingway's short, crisp, terse sentence structure. He is basically the person that invented the modern novel as we know it. So as someone that is a huge fan of the Brontes, of Victorian literature, like Dickens, of course, Hemingway just flipped the script during World War I. Because he was a newspaper reporter, he wrote in these very short, easy sentence structures, but each one of his books does convey so much meaning and emotional depth as well, about the relationships between men and women, about the political situations in war. He really is one of our best modern writers, and he changed the course of the modern novel forever. But my favorite Hemingway novel still remains to this day, The Sun Also Rises. This is kind of like the gateway drug to Ernest Hemingway. I, like many people, first read this in high school. I absolutely love this book. In fact, this is the one that basically started his career when he published it in Europe. It became an instant bestseller, and it established Hemingway as one of the greatest authors of the age. It's such a good book because it just has everything that Hemingway is famous for. The expat lifestyle in Europe. It starts off in Paris, of course. The love triangles, the doomed romances between him and Brett Ashley. And of course, the bullfighting in Spain. Who does not love the matadors and the bullfighting? I just wanted to talk about The Sun Also Rises because I recently came across this really special edition by Canterbury Press, who published these gorgeous leather-bound volumes. I have a number of Canterbury Press books, but this one was too good to miss. It was recently published. It came out for the first time in January, and it's absolutely beautiful, guys. It has the bull on the front cover, the matador on the back, and it's just absolutely stunning. It does feature a number of other writings besides The Sun Also Rises, including The Torrents of Spring, a few of his short stories. Again, Up in Michigan is in this collection, In Our Time. And then what I thought was really exciting, it features a lot of his bylines when he was a newspaper reporter. So I'm really excited to read some of those newspaper articles that he wrote during the war. Really love this edition. I just could not talk about Ernest Hemingway without mentioning this really special new edition of The Sun Also Rises by Canterbury Press. So once I got done with the Hemingway House, I decided to go check out Books and Books, which is a branch of the famous bookstore in Coral Gables, Florida, which I'll be talking about shortly. But this location happens to be in Key West, and it happens to be owned and operated by Judy Blume and her husband. So I went down there and I was really excited and hoping that I would meet Judy Bloom, and I did. She was there and she signed this edition of Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, one of her most famous books, and I just absolutely love this edition. It's so cute. It's by Simon & Schuster, and it just kind of has that like pleather pink cover. The end papers are so much fun, and yes, there's the proof that she did sign it for me. She was absolutely lovely in person to meet. She's in her 80s, guys, and she looks great. I hope when I'm in my 80s, I look as good as Judy Bloom. She couldn't have been any nicer, and her bookstore, Books and Books in Key West, was stunning. So if you're down there partying it up in Key West, just kind of go down the street and go say hi to Judy Bloom while you're there, because it's so cool that she just happens to be right there. And I love the bookstore, just really beautiful modern design and a really nice selection for being a smaller bookstore, very quaint and absolutely lovely. And it was such a treat to meet her in person. Love Judy Bloom. She's the best. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret is probably her most famous book. It's adorable. It's about a little girl who is half Christian and half Jewish, and she's kind of coming to terms with that in 6th grade. She's also becoming a woman, becoming a young girl, and it's just hilarious. I happen to really, really love her Jewish grandmother in this book. That's my favorite character, but yeah, everyone loves Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. So the next day, when I got back to Miami, I decided to head over to Coral Gables, Florida, which is about 20 minutes west of downtown Miami and Miami Beach. And Coral Gables is just a beautiful town. It's very lovely, just all that Spanish architecture, beautiful town and beautiful people. It also has wonderful shopping and dining, so it's a great place for families as well. I highly recommend it if you are in the area and you just want to kind of get out of Miami Beach. It's just a really fun place to kind of walk around, grab an ice cream, and just have a nice day. Books and Books is a beautiful bookstore. I absolutely loved it. I think it is now one of my favorite bookstores in America. It's just a stunning bookstore. It's really, really beautiful in person. Probably because of that Spanish architecture again, just that, you know, whitewashed walls, the Spanish tiles, beautiful. And then when you walk into the bookstore, has a very open floor plan, an open concept. You walk into the main courtyard, and the courtyard just has a number of people just relaxing over a drink, meeting friends for lunch. It also is a restaurant. Happens to have one of the best Cuban sandwiches in town, by the way, which was excellent. So I just really enjoyed sitting there and just grabbing a drink, having a sandwich, and just people watching there, which is what most people were doing there, meeting friends. But I was there, of course, for the books. And again, it was just a beautiful bookstore full of mahogany bookshelves, stunning floor-to-ceiling bookcases. I absolutely loved it. And so the main courtyard is separated on all 3 sides by the bookstore itself. So on one wing of the bookstore is the nonfiction section, and I'll show you some close-up shots of just the history section, the travel section. They also have a number of really beautiful coffee table books on that part of the store. Really, really stunning bookstore. And the booksellers couldn't have been any more friendlier. They were happy to have me film in there, not a problem at all. They gave me a number of excellent recommendations as well. Very helpful and very kind, courteous people. Towards the back of the bookstore, just off of the main courtyard, is the rest of the cafe where you can grab a bite inside or grab a coffee. Of course, the cookbook section is right by the cafe. Really nice area of the store as well. And then on the other wing of the store, on the other side of the store, is the fiction section. So of course I spent a lot of time in the fiction section, and it was really interesting because you are in Miami, so a lot of the editions were in Spanish as well. So just a nice selection of both books in Spanish and in English. Then right next door to the fiction section was the children's department. So the children's department is always my favorite department in every bookstore, and just happy to browse around there. Really nice collection of children's picture books, classics, and then just books that were unique to the Miami area, of course, and the Florida history. So if you're looking for some history of Florida for kids, that was a great place to go. So while I was there, I just could not decide what to get. There was just so much of a selection, and I had so many books already from Key West, and my suitcase was not that big, so I knew I could only grab a couple of books. I did want to get something that was unique to Florida, so I happened to find this edition of Miami by Joan Didion. I had no idea that Joan Didion wrote a book all about Miami, but she did, apparently. And apparently it is a dark book. It's all about the political intrigue of Miami as just being that place between Cuba and the US. It has a lot of immigrants that are there, both legally and illegally. So it tells the whole history of Cuba and Fidel Castro and the Bay of Pigs. It also gets into US politics and Watergate and that type of thing. So it's supposed to be a really interesting book. I'm really looking forward to it. And again, who knew that Joan Didion wrote a book all about Miami? But she did. Books and Books also had a really beautiful selection of Everyman's Library. I love Everyman's Library, and I especially love when they are all on a shelf together because they just look so good together. And just the way that Books and Books displayed their editions of Everyman's Library, beautiful. They also happen to have a huge selection of the Everyman's Pocket Library poetry, which I've been trying to collect more and more of the pocket poetry because it's so cool and these books are so adorable. So nice selection of that. And so of course I got one about books and libraries. And this is actually a really cool edition of poetry just by a lot of famous authors and their opinions about books. So what is not to love about this Everyman's Library Pocket Poetry edition of Books and Libraries? Thank you everyone for joining me for my overview of Key West and my trip down there to visit the Hemingway House. I just had the best time. It was so fun to see the Hemingway House in person and see his writing studio and talk to all the fellow bibliophiles like myself. It was also a treat to meet Judy Blume, one of my favorite children's authors. So if you are in Key West, do not forget to visit the Hemingway House and then go on over to Books and Books, Judy Blume's bookstore, and say hi to Judy Blume as well. She is such a sweet lady in person. Also, don't forget, if you're in Miami, to check out the main branch of Books and Books in Coral Gables. This is now one of my favorite bookstores in America. I loved it. Thank you everyone and have a great day.